January 29, 2022, Canton, Massachusetts. It's just after 6 in the morning. The temperature has dropped well below freezing. And in the snow, in front of a house on Fairview Road, a man is lying face down. He is not moving. His name is John O'Keefe. He is 46 years old. He is a Boston police officer. He has a family. He has friends. He has a girlfriend who loves him. But by the time the sun rises, John O'Keefe is dead. Now, here's where this story gets dark. Because the question was never really whether John O'Keefe died that night. The question that has torn this entire case apart is who killed him. And powerful people may not want you to find out the truth. Welcome back to Dark Files, the channel that goes where mainstream media won't. We dig into the cases, the cover-ups, and the controversies that keep you up at night. If you're new here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what we cover here, you will not find it packaged this cleanly anywhere else. And for those of you who keep coming back, you already know. Dark Files doesn't do surface level. We go all the way in. Today, we are diving deep into one of the most explosive, most talked about criminal cases in recent American history. A case that has divided courtrooms, shattered a community, ignited a nationwide debate about police corruption, and left one critical question unanswered. Did Karen Read murder her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe? Or was she framed, set up by the very people sworn to protect and serve? By the end of this video, you will have the full picture, every piece of evidence, every suspicious coincidence. And I want you, in the comments, to tell me what you think happened that night. Are you ready? Because this one goes deep. To understand this case, you need to understand who Karen Read and John O'Keefe actually were. Because the media has painted very specific pictures of both of them, and not all of it is fair. John O'Keefe was a Boston police officer with over 16 years on the force. By all accounts, he was a dedicated cop. He had taken in his brother's children after a family tragedy, raising them as his own. Friends described him as loyal, hardworking, sometimes guarded. He was by every measure a figure rooted inside the Boston law enforcement community. Karen Read was his girlfriend. She had a master's degree in finance, worked as a financial analyst, and by most accounts was sharp, independent, and deeply devoted to John. They had been in a relationship for about 2 years. By early 2022, their relationship had reportedly been going through some tension, something the prosecution would later try to use against her. Now here's where it gets interesting. John O'Keefe didn't just have work friends. He ran in tight social circles with other Boston area law enforcement officers, including the Albert family. Brian Albert was a Boston police officer. His brother, Chris Albert, was also connected to law enforcement. And on the night of January 28th into January 29th, 2022, John O'Keefe was at the Albert family home on Fairview Road in Canton. So here's my first question for you, and I want you to think about this as we go. If you were a police officer, and your colleague is found dead outside another colleague's home, how hard do you think investigators are really going to look at the people inside that house? Keep that thought, because the answer to that question is at the center of everything. Let's walk through what we know and what is disputed about that night. On the evening of January 28, 2022, John O'Keefe attended what appears to have been a social gathering at the Albert family home on Fairview Road, Canton. Karen Read was not at this gathering. According to the prosecution's timeline, Karen Read dropped John off at the house, or near it, late that night after the two had been out together earlier. At approximately 12:30 in the morning, Karen Read's vehicle, a black Lexus SUV, was captured on surveillance cameras in the area. The prosecution's core argument is this: Karen Read, in a fit of rage or intoxication, struck John O'Keefe with her SUV, leaving him dying in the snow, and then drove away. That is the official charge: second-degree murder. And if proven, it carries a potential life sentence. But here's where the defense's story diverges completely, and here's where things get deeply suspicious. The defense argues that John O'Keefe never made it inside the Albert home that night. Or alternatively, that he was beaten inside the Albert home, and his body was moved and dumped outside in the snow. They argue the car impact story is a fabrication designed to protect the Albert family and their law enforcement connections. Now, which version sounds more believable to you? A woman kills her boyfriend in a fit of rage, in front of a house full of witnesses, and just drives away? Or a group of well-connected cops, with a lot to hide, close ranks around one of their own? Let's look at the evidence, because the evidence in this case is where things get truly, deeply strange. Let's start with the physical evidence, because this is the backbone of the entire case, and it is riddled with problems. Exhibit A, the tail light fragments. When investigators examined the scene, they found pieces of what appeared to be plastic near John O'Keefe's body. The prosecution argued these were fragments from Karen Redd's Lexus SUV, specifically from the tail light, proving her vehicle struck him. The defense fired back hard. Their experts argued the distribution pattern of those fragments was inconsistent with a car strike. They also raised questions about how those fragments got there, raising the possibility they were planted after the fact. And here, that detail that made national headlines. Investigators reportedly found tail light fragments inside the Albert family home. Let me say that again, inside the house. How does a tail light fragment from a car impact outside end up inside the house? That question has never been satisfactorily answered. Exhibit B, the dog bite wounds. John O'Keefe's arm showed wounds that, according to defense experts, were consistent with dog bites, not car impact injuries. The Albert family owned a large dog. The prosecution's medical experts disagreed, attributing the wounds to the vehicle strike. But independent forensic veterinarians who examined the evidence said the wound patterns were far more consistent with animal bites than with vehicle trauma. So who's right? And why does it matter? Because if John O'Keefe was bitten by a dog, that dog was inside that house. Which means John O'Keefe was inside that house. Exhibit C, the digital evidence, Karen Reed's phone. Prosecutors pointed to searches on Karen Reed's phone in the early morning hours of January 29th. Searches related to hypothermia and how cold affects the body. They argued this showed consciousness of guilt. The defense argued she was desperately trying to understand what had happened to John after he was found unresponsive. A completely human reaction in a state of panic. Now ask yourself this honestly. If you found your partner collapsed in the snow and you didn't know what was wrong, what would you do? You'd probably search for answers on your phone too. Exhibit D, the FBI investigation. Here's the detail that most mainstream coverage glosses over. In the midst of this case, the FBI opened its own federal investigation. Not into Karen Reed, into the investigation itself. Federal agents reportedly began looking at whether evidence was mishandled, tampered with, or whether law enforcement conducted a legitimate inquiry. When the FBI starts investigating the investigators, that is not a small thing. That is an extraordinary development. So here is where I need you to pause and really think. We have fragments of evidence that do and make sense. We have wounds that expert witnesses can't agree on. We have the FBI looking at the investigation itself. Does this sound like a clean, straightforward murder case to you? The Karen Reed case didn't just become a legal battle. It became a cultural phenomenon. Karen Reed's legal team, led by defense attorneys David Yannetti and Alan Jackson, mounted one of the most aggressive and detailed defenses in recent Massachusetts legal history. They didn't just poke holes in the prosecution's case. They went on offense. They pointed fingers directly at the Albert family. They called out law enforcement connections. They used the term most prosecutors dread hearing across a courtroom: frame up. Outside the courthouse, something remarkable was happening. Supporters, hundreds and then thousands of them, rallied behind Karen Reed. Free Karen Reed became a movement. People wore t-shirts. They held signs. They showed up to every court date. This was not a quiet case. This was a community that had chosen a side, and a significant portion of that community did not believe the official story. The first trial, which began in 2024, ended in a dramatic and controversial mistrial. The jury could not reach a unanimous verdict. The prosecution immediately announced they would retry her. The defense cried foul, arguing that a retrial would constitute double jeopardy given the jury's apparent leanings. The legal arguments over double jeopardy went all the way to the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court. Ultimately, the court allowed the retrial to proceed. The second trial began in early 2025. Now here's a question for you in the comments, and I genuinely want to know your answer. Do you think a retrial after a hung jury is justice? Or is it the state using its unlimited resources to grind down a defendant until they get the verdict they want? Let's talk directly about the cover-up theory, because this is the part that the defense built their entire case around, and it deserves to be examined on its merits. The defense's theory, laid out methodically across weeks of testimony, is this: John O'Keefe was assaulted inside the Albert home during the late-night gathering. The assault, whether intentional or the result of a fight that escalated, left him fatally injured. In a panic, and with the full awareness that multiple law enforcement officers and their families were implicated, a decision was made. His body was moved outside. Karen Reed's vehicle, which had been in the area that night, was used as a convenient explanation. The defense pointed to the tight-knit nature of Boston law enforcement networks. They argued that investigators who worked alongside the Albert family would be naturally inclined, consciously or not, to steer the investigation away from the house and toward an easier, cleaner target, the girlfriend. There's a term in criminal justice for this: tunnel vision. Once investigators decide who they think did it, evidence gets interpreted through that lens. Conflicting evidence gets minimized. Alternative theories get ignored. And sometimes, deliberately or not, the wrong person ends up on trial. Is that what happened here? The defense says yes. The prosecution says absolutely not. And the jury, well, the first jury couldn't decide. What do you think? Drop your theory in the comments. I read every single one. As of 2025, the Karen Reed case remains one of the most legally complex and hotly contested criminal cases in New England history. The second trial has brought new testimony, new scrutiny, and new attention to the evidence that was disputed in the first trial. Karen Reed has maintained her innocence throughout. She has said repeatedly, publicly, and in court that she did not kill John O'Keefe. She says she loved him. She says she is the victim of a system that decided she was guilty before the investigation even began. John O'Keefe's family believes she is responsible for his death. They want justice for him. And in the midst of all of this, in the middle of all the legal arguments and protest rallies and courtroom drama, there's a real man who died in the snow on a January night. His children, the niece and nephew he was raising, lost their guardian. His colleagues lost a brother in blue. Whatever the truth is, and we may be getting closer to it, the human cost of this case is real and devastating. The key question that this trial must ultimately answer is not just who did it, but whether the American justice system, when it involves powerful insiders, can still deliver a fair result to an outsider. So let me bring it all the way back to where we started and leave you with this. A Boston police officer is dead. A woman is on trial for his murder. The FBI is investigating the investigators. Tail light fragments turned up inside a house they shouldn't have been in. Dogged by wounds that don't match the official story. A first jury that couldn't convict. A community that chose a side. Is Karen Reed a murderer? Or is she a woman who drove away from a house one night and became the most convenient suspect in a case that powerful people needed to close? I don't have the final verdict for you today, because the courts haven't delivered it yet. But I do have this: the truth has a way of surfacing. It always does. Even when people in high places work very hard to keep it buried. Here at Dark Files, we believe in asking the questions that others won't. We believe you deserve the full story. And we're going to keep bringing it to you. If this video made you think, if it gave you something that the nightly news didn't, please subscribe to Dark Files right now. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Seriously, what do you think happened to John O'Keefe? And share this video with someone who needs to know the full story, because the truth doesn't spread itself. I'll see you in the next Dark File.